Hello, everyone, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to UNMAS Iraq side event. Our event today would be on women inclusion in mine action, challenges and change. I would like to start this session by giving the floor to Mrs. Salima, the head of DMA Gender Unit, the Directorate of Mine Action here in Iraq. Mrs. Salima would take up the floor after me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kauka. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to produce my thanks and start this event by introducing myself. My name is Salima Ansir Karam. I am the head of Iraq Director in Mine Action Gender Unit. Women Inclusion, Mine Action, Challenges and Change is the title of this session, and it is only convenient to give you a brief background on DMA efforts in women's implementing and gender mainstreaming. Since its established, the DMA has been concerted with the participation of women in the implementation of mine action activities in explosive ordnance, risk education, and victim assistance. Due to the different community customs and tradition in Iraq and the social diversity that requires the presence of women in different types of activities. In 2017, in order to promote work consolidating gender policy in our institution, a gender-specific structure that pursues a partnership with women and enable them in all technical and administrative work was formed in the gender unit. The unit has been keen on equal participation of women and men in implementation of activities, the inclusion of women in training course of quality management and operation, and promoting field participation in conducting non-technical survey operation. The gender unit had also a role in empowering women in public administration and implementing workshops in different types such as leadership, dialogue, and negotiation. In addition, the gender unit had and continue to have a strong focus to coordinate with national, international, and UN explosive ordnance in peace and sector entitled on gender. At DMA, we aspire to empower women to the level they can contribute the bridge to the gender gaps in the sector in gender to achieve the goal of sustainable development and response to the obligation under UNSCR 3025, Women, Peace and Security. As I came to the end, this is my introduction. I would like to produce my thank for you and your attention, and would like to give the floor to UNMAS Iraq, Ms. Al-Jawad, to give you a brief introduction to the context and set the tone of the later presentation. Kautar, you have the floor. Thank you.
Okay, so welcome again. I would like to give you a brief introduction on UNMAS Iraq latest efforts on mixed-sex teams, and I would start by thank you so much, everyone, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and colleagues for attending this session. So I would like to start like the very top of this thing by a quote by Pam Brown, which is an Australian poet. She says, and I quote, "The modern woman has found new roles while simultaneously continuing to fill all the traditional ones." This is happening in Iraq. In 2019, UNMAS Iraq initiated a gender-responsive approach that safeguards and integrates the needs of women, men, boys, and girls into explosive hazard management by forming its very first mixed-sex team of searchers in Iraq. This initiative came in an effort to increase the participation of women in the traditionally male-dominated mine action sector, and as a necessary step in the peace building of their communities, of course. In addition to its drive to contribute in changing gender norms in Iraq, at that time, UNMAS Iraq mixed-sex team brought together Yazidi and Muslim women and men to work side by side as clearance operators. This initiative was just the spark for many more. The upcoming presentation that will be delivered by colleagues of mine of UNMAS Iraq will showcase the findings of a new study conducted by UNMAS Iraq to understand the impact of women employment in a non-traditional role at a traditionally male-dominated sector. How their employment would affect the women themselves, their families, and the community in general, both socially and economically. So I will give the floor now to Mr. Jeffrey McMurdo, our international consultant, who happened to do all of this survey. And afterward, the presentation will be and the floor will be by Nigeria, UNMAS Nigeria program to deliver their findings on their latest baseline assessment. Jeffrey, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kauser. And welcome everyone to this presentation of the UNMAS Iraq survey of women in mine action in Nineveh Governorate. This was the first field level research of this type in Iraq, and the data gathered is very fresh. We finished the last survey interviews on the 8th of April. And as always, background and context is very important, and especially for this survey and the environment we were working in Nineveh. The governorate has experienced many years of conflict since 2003. The ISIL or ISIS occupation that was by far the worst. It's now reconstruction and clearance of UXO and IEDs. In speak of Nineveh, it's more accurate to speak of the communities rather than the governorate as a whole, as it is very diverse culturally. And because of that, the understanding of the gender roles of men and women are very fluid, and it depends really which community you're in at the time as to how to approach that. In terms of history, Mine Action Group, MAG, started employing female explosive clearance teams, and that was followed by UNMAS with mixed sex teams. These were the first such teams in Iraq in non-traditional jobs. And to be honest, in some ways it was a type of social intrusion, even a shock for some of the communities and cultures. And these are some of the oldest in the world, and the traditions there are very well established. Next slide. The study originated from a desire of both UNMAS and the donor, the government of the Netherlands, to understand the experience of sex teams and how and to what degree it changed their economic and social status, both in the family and the community, and also the gender dynamics with their male colleagues. For UNMAS, it was also a duty of care responsibility to these women and their male colleagues. And this was especially so because of Nineveh's experience of the conflict, the extremism that the communities lived under for some years, and that they're still recovering. For the methodology, we used an existing socioeconomic survey model developed by GICHD, first with UNMAS in Afghanistan and then with UNICEF in Sri Lanka. and we adapted those questionnaires to the Iraqi context. The survey was only to UNMAS implementing partners. There were 5 organizations delivering risk education and explosives clearance. We did quantitative surveys with female mine action staff. Those were carried out in person directly with the participants in Nineveh. And then we did qualitative interviews of family and friends of the staff, the female staff, and remotely by telephone. We also did 14 interviews with community stakeholders, almost all of them in Nineveh. The next slide. In total, we had 176 participants. 80 of these were men and women working in the mixed-sex teams. And as the graph shows, there was an almost equal numbers of those doing risk education and those doing explosive search and clearance activities, especially when you include EOD operators and the team leaders. Next slide. And to the all-important findings of the survey. In terms of demographics, in general, women in mine action in Nineveh are younger than the men, educated, more likely to be single. A third of the women were motivated primarily by social reasons, and 2/3 by economic reasons, especially for the women who had been unemployed prior to their job in mine action. Some women based their service motivations on family members who were killed or injured by explosives, or they saw it happen in their community, they wanted to help. Some women just traditional jobs, it was a new opportunity to explore. Women who were IDPs, and the mine action job was a pull factor in helping them and their families return to their communities. Next slide. For the social impact, a key finding is that the more families and communities learned about women and mixed-sex teams, the more they accepted them. This is especially relevant to the safety issue. Initially, when the recruitment started, only 1/3 of families accepted the idea of women in explosives clearance. In time, as they became more familiar with it and the women began work, over 2/3 acceptance. For communities, the change in acceptance was even a greater range. And I think this shows that managing cultural change, providing timely and relevant information, these transitions is really key. At the same time, Nineveh was very diverse, as mentioned before. In some communities, the rejection of mixed sex had a solid base of 1/3, and this did not really change over time. In addition, 49% of community members recognize that there's social challenges for the women in mine action. That's a lot. That's a very high number. Saw safety challenges. This is personal safety to them within the community, and that's a concern both for the mine action sector and the government. And the women themselves, while we were doing the survey, we realized they were quite aware of their social and safety risks. And as a result, it became apparent to us that for many women, whatever empowerment they experienced, they expressed it covertly, not overtly, because of the within the communities. Next slide. When we look at the perceptions that came through the surveys of the women and the men, I think it's important to remember that they were really social pioneers in Nineveh. They're experiencing new cultural changes and trying to understand it within their own cultural contexts, which often varied community to community. For the men in mine action, there's a very solid majority of acceptance of mixed-sex teams, 69%, over 2/3. And some in the survey were very of the whole concept. Other men, however, they tolerated women in mine action, but they did not accept as well as the men. That's a conditional acceptance. It might change over time. This was how they reacted to the mixed-sex teams. For a third of the men, still did not recognize a need for women in mine action. For the women, they found a real consensus in their self-perceptions. The women's skills, their agency with family and friends and colleagues, all increased. So too did their decision-making powers. This was their perception, but it mirrors what families and communities observed to us as well. For many women, when they were talking to us, we could see that their work was seen as a life-changing experience for them. And as the survey team progressed in doing the interviews, it became apparent we were consistently meeting women who were confident, motivated, happy, and ambitious. And many of them said they wanted to make a career in mine action. And I think a lot of the credit should go to the implementing organizations and how they manage men and women working together for the first time. We also had excellent discussions with all the implementing partners, including MAG. In addition, women in mine action, and this was the last question in the survey, and we asked them, do you have anything else to say? They often told us that they wanted other women in Iraq to experience the same economic and social empowerment that they did. The economic impact findings resulted in quite positive data. Over 2 action increased their contribution to the household, and on average, the contribution amount actually doubled. The financial benefit of the salary was, we were told, a factor in acceptance of women in mine action. And as a result, the women had increased agency in the family, as well as increased influence in decision-making. Next slide. Recommendations, the key one really is the and how it's approached on the basis of managing the change, these social challenges. And that means applying a change management strategy that's endorsed by all the organizations. It means engaging communities, building trust in the recruitment process. And related to that, Ninawa communities should see mixed-sex teams as the heroes of construction that they are, perhaps through public information campaigns. We found it's kind of tragic that the women in mine action who do these hard and dangerous jobs that help make safe their communities are worried that their communities will know about the jobs. This is changing in some places, especially as the reconstruction proceeds, but the process can be helped to be sped up with the right strategy. Also, there should be no barriers to women in training opportunities and certification testing. This is a government responsibility that the mine action sector can provide advocacy and support to resolving. And men and women in mine action could benefit by sharing experiences with other teams in a workshop, and also with a dedicated website that they could use for sharing knowledge and networking. Next slide. In conclusion, in many ways, the mine action sector in Ninawa has completed a phase. Mixed-sex teams have been introduced into Iraq. They're firmly established. Gender equality has a start, and the mine action sector, they're very aware of this. The sector is also aware of the challenge of the next phase, which is gender parity, increasing the numbers of women in explosives clearance especially, and also in higher levels of responsibility, or in non-traditional jobs that are still not covered well, like drivers, as in the photo. In general, the survey reveals a positive trend. There's a good foundation on which to build, especially for mine action operations in central and southern Iraq, where everyone can learn from the experience gained in Ninawa. And the last slide, we have a short video presenting Noor Dawood. She's a hazard management team leader who works with FSD, an UNMAS implementing partner. Please note that the film does not depict Noor herself. It shows a typical mixed-sex team deploying in the field, but the voiceover is the voice of Noor. Thank you.
قررت أنه أنا أعمل بالمجال المتعلق بالألغام وليس القانون اللي هي الشهادة اللي أنا حصلت عليها. طبعا حبيت هذا العمل أكثر، طورت نفسي به، أخذت دورات هواية بهذا المجال. أصبحت أنه أنا فخورة أنه أنا أشتغل بهذا العمل وأقدم خدمة للمجتمع وأنقذ حياة البشر من خطورة هذه المتفجرات. أما أفكاري حول الفرق المختلطة بين النساء والرجال طبعا أصبحت هي الفكرة فكرة ناجحة كلش، وبدأ المجتمع يتقبلها طبعا، وخاصة بعد ما ثبتت المرأة أنه هي تستطيع العمل بهذا المجال، والنجاح اللي وصلته فرق الإزالة اللي هم دخلوا العنصر النسوي أيضا مع الرجال، وطهروا أكثر من حقول كانت بها هناك خطورة وعبوات ناسفة. فهي فكرة كلش ناجحة موضوع الاختلاط بين العنصر النسوي والرجال. أصبحت قائد فريق. طبعا الشهادة اللي حصلت عليها من بسماية اللي هي مستوى الثالث لمعالجة الذخائر غير المتفجرة، طبعا وبعد اجتياز الاختبار من قبل منظمة FSD لقادة الفرق، وأنا نجحت بهذا الاختبار، وأيضا وجود الخبرة السابقة، وأعتقد أنه أنا البنت الوحيدة داخل العراق أصبحت أنه قائد فريق لفريق إزالة. طبعا أطمح لأنه أتعلم المزيد، أدخل الكثير من الدورات اللي هي متعلقة بالإزالة والمعالجة، طبعا لزيادة المعلومات حول هذا المجال، لأن الصراحة بالنسبة لي أنا أحب أطور في عملي وأقدم الأفضل للمجتمع. أتمنى أنه يكون دائم هناك دعم لعمل المرأة في هذا المجال، مساعدتهم في تقديم الخدمة للمجتمع حالها حال الرجل طبعا، تطوير تدريب النساء وزيادة فرق النساء والاختلاط في المنظمات والشركات اللي تعمل في إزالة الألغام والمتفجرات.
That's the end of the presentation, and Kauter, I hand the floor back to you.
Thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you for the hard work done on this study. It is an excellent survey with an excellent findings on the nature of like UNMAS Iraq work and UNMAS Iraq implementing partners on the ground. So thank you so much. And now I will handle the presentation to UNMAS Nigeria. From UNMAS Nigeria, we have Rashi to present the findings of the gender baseline assessment. Rashi, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kauta. Can you hear me? Thank you very much. Morning, afternoon, and evening, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and colleagues. Gunawardana, Program and Communications Officer for UNMAS Nigeria. So I would like to share a few lessons learned from our recent gender baseline assessment. Next slide, please. Thanks. So let me start by giving a bit of a background of the situation in Nigeria. The conflict in Northeast is now in its 11th year. The insurgency has persisted and has been growing in the recent years. So the security crises have proliferated around the country. This is a well-known fact, and the situation continues to affect millions of Nigerians, particularly women and girls who are currently subjected to rape and kidnapping incidents. So looking at records, we've noticed that especially girls from schools and women and girls from the bushes, when they go in firewood collection, are being kidnapped and raped. So just to highlight, on the 26th of February, there was a mass kidnapping of 300 schoolgirls for ransom in the Northwest, which means it's spreading all over Nigeria. Also, forceful recruitment of boys by the non-state armed groups. These type of things are on the rise in Nigeria, actually. So women and girls are drafted as suicide bombers. We call them person-borne improvised explosive devices, PPIDs. And also in the meantime, the cases of explosive incidents are also on the rise, particularly IEDs in populated areas. Dominant use of IEDs along roads, we call them road-planted IEDs. and person-borne IEDs, PBIDs, and the vehicle-borne IEDs. So the majority of incidents are due to victim-operated IEDs, precisely in the form of pressure plates. So this is how actually it meets the definition of a landmine. So it's also important to highlight that Nigeria doesn't have a national mine action authority, which means no systematic humanitarian mine clearance has commenced so far. Next slide, please. Thanks. Our gender study was based in the three key states in northeast Nigeria: Borno, Adamawa, and Yobe. And the study focused on the National Police Force, the Explosive Ordnance Disposal Unit, the team, and the National Security and Civil Defense Corps, which goes as NSCDC. So they actually have a unit called Chemical, Biological, Radiological Explosive Unit. So these were like the two specific sections that our study has been focused on. Next slide, please. Thanks. Supported by the Federal Republic of Germany, we provide technical assistance to the National Police Force and the NSCDC. So for this, we conduct a series of capacity building activities like IED disposal training, explosive hazard first responder, IFAC, and emergency trauma bag training. This is actually, as I mentioned before, for the police and the NSCDC. So in 2019, we conducted a pilot responder course, and then we made explicit requests to both organizations to female participants. So at that time, we identified a clear underrepresentation of female students at these pilot first responder courses. So we realized that the presence and role of women is limited. Dealing with explosive ordnance anyway rooted in stereotype for men, which is acknowledged. So with the help and guidance of our global gender advisor, Georgia Diopoli, we hired Partners West Africa Nigeria, a national gender consultant, to undertake this study. The idea of the gender baseline assessment is to identify gaps, challenges and opportunities for women from the police force and the NSCDC, so that they will play a greater role towards the mine action. Capacity building will support actions related to gender equality and women empowerment in mine action. So essentially, we wanted to realign our projects to create results-based gender responsive interventions, because we really believe that to have women as agents of change, and then they will be trained as trainers for IED disposal at the end of our projects. Next slide, please. So there have been a policy at the national level to have a science-based educational background for candidates to join EOD. This has been actually recently lifted. However, state commands still maintain this requirement. So that may be a reason to the limited number of female officers in. So the police doesn't recruit married, but NSCDC has given an opportunity for married women to enter the NSCDC. Certain levels of gender inequality in regulations, especially in the police, are supposed to be eliminated, removed, and some provisions like women are to perform only traffic control and administrative duties related to women and children. So there is also a gender policy existing in the police and NSCDC, who are actually finalizing the real practical side of it. However, gender mainstreaming is yet to be accepted and implemented by the leadership of the two institutions. So cultural and religious norms are barriers, especially in northern parts of the country. And there is no female leaderships in EOD and the EOD section, the CBRNE of NSCDC, of the police and the NSCDC. So there are training schools run by both organizations, which is supported by international organizations. But again, there is a limited participation of female volunteers. So basically, they don't have management positions. Next slide, please. I'm not sure if you could see it well. These graphs actually show very low numbers of women working in EOD units across Northeast. For example, in Borno, where the epicenter of crisis, where UNMAS is located as well, the EOD, the police reports only 5 women to 35 men in that section. So it's more or less a scenario with the NSCDC as well. Next slide, please. Thanks. So I would like to emphasize that some of the recommendations are beyond UNMAS mandate, but this can be definitely useful to understand potential areas of actions by other stakeholders or maybe in partnership with others. The key recommendation is requesting the management to add more female participation in raising awareness of the functions of both dedicated units. This is actually to encourage more female volunteers to join, and especially the elimination of the science-based background and knowledge requirement. This is actually practically to be enforced at the state level so that anyone can apply for EOD. And then considering the number of female person-borne improvised explosive devices, the suicide bombers, and female explosive ordnance victims, it's recommended to have more voices in leadership positions in EOD unit. The two institutions need to legalize the gender policies to address gender inequality issues in their regulatory acts and orders. So UNMAS to partner with the Federal Minister of Foreign Women Affairs to promote UNSCR 1325 resolution to NPF and NSCDC. And also CSO to engage communities, traditional and religious leaders to advocate women's enrollment in the security service provider sectors. UNMAS to conduct some advocacy role to promote women within the EOD units at the federal level with senior management of both organizations and state level management. Next slide, please. So we will launch an assessment officially with the project beneficiaries and the Minister of Women Affairs at a high-level meeting. This will be on the 3rd of June, and we'll publish the digital report for online access. So we will also take this opportunity to identify and discuss the typology of best practices we'll share among the security service providers throughout our capacity building interventions. Thank you very much. I would like to hand back the floor to Kauthar.
Many thanks, Harshi, for an excellent presentation and a very well done work done on the assessment. Like for UNMAS Iraq, there are some, let's say, interconnected dots that can be used from in terms of recommendations and other points. So I would like now to move on into the questions segment. Our colleagues from other programs, we have some questions. For example, here we have a question from Margarita, which is also similar to one that was asked by Haider. It says, congrats to the MA Gender team for the achievements. Would it be possible to receive a copy of the study and the PowerPoint presentation? A similar comment and question by Haider as well says, congratulations to the MA, interesting study and findings. Would this study be available? So I would like to give this, and there's also another comment by Brenna who said that she or he needs a copy of the report as well. So Jeff, would you please answer this question? Thank you.
Thank you, Kauthar. Sometimes I have the same question myself. We thought it would be more advanced than it has been. It's taken a long time to wade through all the different databases, but the draft report is currently in review now by external partners, and in the month of June it should be released, and a copy of this PowerPoint will be with NDM time, and people can access it from NDM or from UNMAS Iraq. July, the survey report should be out.
Thanks, Jeff. There is also another question to you directed by Roxana from MAG. She's saying, when you talk about the change in acceptance level by women's families from 34% initially to 66% later on, how long did it take to achieve that cultural change? And are there specific aspects that helped that shift?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. We were interviewing both risk education and the hazard management female staff and male staff. And some of the risk education staff had longer experience than the mine action staff of UNMAS partners, which started in 2019. So for that group, which is really sort of the key group within the survey, we were looking at 1 to 2 years experience, depending on when those teams were assembled and deployed. The change with regards to the families, the initial reaction, especially in some communities, people told us like there was shock that how could you imagine women doing dangerous work like that? And they were asking also, why would you do that? So there were very difficulties with the recruitment and explaining how this can go ahead. And one NGO had a good idea when they recruited the women and they were going to start the 1-month training, which was in a different community. They told the family members that they can go with the woman from that family to the training center and see the start of the training the training course, see the facility, and then when they're ready, they can go home. And that was very successful. Within 1 or 2 or 3 days, the family members are satisfied. They were allowed to see the training and understanding of what was involved in terms of the processes of the work, and especially the safety aspect and the safety concerns of the family, that there were processes and procedures that ruled how the employee would with explosives once they were identified. So that was a good idea. I think also for other reasons for the families, they saw their wives or daughters or sisters developing personally and getting strength as they got more experience in the work, that sense of empowerment and happiness. And of course, the economic impact, as the family saw the benefits that came from having their family member working in mine action. Issues, depending on the community, a place like Sinjar, very, very low level of rejection of women in mine action, 6%. In other communities, it was around 30% still. And it's a process that's not just with regards to mine action, it's for Nineveh in general, because many of these communities had a kind of social lockdown, not just during the ISIL, but in the period after, and it continues today. And also, we were told that people are starting to stay out later at night, but a year, 6, 9 months that. So it's not just with regards to a social change like women in mine action, it's a society in general starting to get used to going back to life before the period of the conflict. And now, even in rural areas, when mixed teams deploy, places like Makmur, south of Mosul, the village, these women out there working, and their daughters and wives and sisters see them working as well. And the mine action managers, the NGOs, told me that they're getting calls from people in the village asking, are there job opportunities for their daughters, for their sisters? So that's a good sign. But really, in the end, it's about building trust. It's a process, I think, that needs to start from the time that the recruitment begins.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for your response. So there is another question from Hannah. She says, in both presentations, I understand one of the initial obstacles is the training opportunities. What is expected as follow-up for Nigeria? Would there be such projects in the future to create training opportunities? Harshi, would you please answer Hannah's question? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Kaufa. Actually, I answered on the platform as well. So as I mentioned before, we initiated the trainings on IED disposal, first responder, emergency trauma bag, and IFAC. So these courses we will, like, now that we have recommendations from the gender baseline assessment, so we will continue to integrate more women in our trainings, which is supposed to be scheduled 2021 and beyond. This will be definitely continued with more integration of women in our trainings. Thank you. Oh.
Thanks, Harshi. Another question is directed to Jeff. So it is also from Hannah. She says, you mentioned in the findings about the community perception of women employment with mine action. Are there concerns of women for the community to find out? And how women themselves illustrate their empowerment? Thank you. The floor is yours, Jeff.
Yeah, thank you. The community of women employment, yeah, it depends on the community. Sinjar is the most advanced in that way. And there was one issue that kept coming up everywhere, and it didn't always come up right away, but eventually it would come up, and that was the uniforms. And it took us a while to realize how serious this was for the communities. And part of it, it's a military type uniform. The teams, when they would go through community roadblocks, the people there wouldn't believe them when it would. They do humanitarian work. They're doing reconstruction mine action, because there's a lot of different militias that move around, and the communities wanted to know who are these people because they look like they're in the military. And also the uniforms have trousers, and that is a really big issue for some communities. And there was one team of actually on their own agreed to do certain alterations the uniforms that they worked in. And of course, the uniforms have to be practical, but if they can be accommodated to take in community concerns, everybody's happy to accept the women doing those non-traditional jobs. In terms of, maybe I might also add in Sinjar, the trousers, the uniforms are not a problem. It's a different culture. Women served in the Peshmerga, and we actually saw in Sinjar one shop that had military supplies, and on the sidewalk in front, mannequin wearing a tailored, stylized with pants. So that's the status uniform issue in Sinjar. It's not really a problem, but most other communities, it really is. In terms of the women themselves, in the most conservative community that we went to, which was Tamar, and we met with a women's representative there, she said that's what's really needed is for to start the process used to this idea of mixed-sex teams and women doing this kind of work. And she said once that starts, other families who would like women do that kind of work will enough to risk going against pressures from within the community or within the extended family. So it's really that breakthrough that's needed, and I think what the sector has done is establish the idea of mixed-sex teams. People are getting used to women doing that non-traditional work, and then other women see it and they want it as well. So it really is, it means a lot to these women who have been social pioneers and taking the brunt of, you know, social risks in doing something that women had not done there before.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for the explanation. So there is a comment, which is also a thank you note from Dominique. He says, thank you, Kauthar, Salima, Jeffrey, and Harshi for the very interesting presentations. I would like to second Salima's point that there is a need to link this work to the Women, Peace and Security agenda under UNSCR 3025, specifically the national action plans in both Iraq and Nigeria. These UNMAS assessments provide useful evidence of transformative change on gender norms, very relevant to UNSCR 3025. So I believe Mrs. Salima has a comment on Dominique's point.
Thank you, Dominique, about your thanks and how DMA connected the program of DMA with 3025. This is the work is important for the future, sure. And in this period now, I would like to thank Jeff and Harsha about this rich information in our presentation, and I hope we are do together in future more. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mrs. Salima. So I would like also to, like myself, to ask Jeff to elaborate further on the uniforms issue and the fact that there were women working as searchers are unable to like change their uniforms into their work uniforms in front of their families and in front of their community. So this is actually a point that I would like you to elaborate a little bit on, Jeff, if possible. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point. Many, if not most, not put on their uniforms when they left the house in the morning in the neighborhood. They the mosque that was near the work site or the organization's office, they would change there, go do the work, go back, change at the end of the day, go back to their normal clothes and go home. One manager told me in one of the last interviews we did with an NGO that some in Mosul are home, and that's in keeping with the general liberalization of society now as well. And I think the women also feeling more comfortable with the jobs that they're doing, not caring so much anymore. It's a bother. You got to keep changing all the time. So that was very, but for most of them still outside of Sinjar, it's still an issue. They still don't want to reveal to the community the actual work they're doing. Some say they do risk education if they say they're working in mine action, not explosive clearance. And that's more acceptable to the communities and understood. So it really is an issue, and it's really not fair to we all felt this on the survey team, that they do these hard jobs, it's dangerous, and they don't get the credit. They actually hide it from the community, which is amazing.
Jeff, for hitting on this point, I know like I shouldn't have asked you this question, but like I cheated. So I have another question from Huda to UNMAS Nigeria program. So her question says, one question regarding the coordination with other actors like UNHCR, for example, to benefit from existing women committees and community structures to expand outreach activities and awareness raising sessions. Harshi, would you be able to answer Huda's question? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kauthar. This is a very interesting question. Actually, Mine Action, UNMAS is the protection, like let's say we are a subsector of the protection sector, which is organized by and administered by the UNHCR. So, and also we work with the UN Women. And, we are a member of the gender thematic, which actually represented by a few women-based organizations, as well as the UNFPA, UNICEF, UNHCR, and the WFP. So, and also there is another group called Development Partners Group for Gender, which we are as well a member to exchange our experiences when it comes to gender mainstreaming, and then to include their suggestions in our work, and of course, since we do not want to work in silos for sure, as Mine Action is a little bit marginalized when it comes to broader development perspective. So this is where we look to integrate ourselves in terms of advocating gender mainstreaming in humanitarian mine action in Northeast Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harshi. So there were also another question by Haidar, which I think Jeffrey already answered it. It was on, do you think that affiliation with the security forces can hold the normalization progress for women to enroll in mine action, keeping in mind the security situation in Iraq? So Jeff, you answered this question. Thank you so much. So I believe if there are no more questions, we can move into the closure of this session. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending, and many thanks to those commenters who congratulated UNMAS Iraq program and UNMAS Nigeria for this presentation and for those two studies. Of course, I would like to give the floor now to Mrs. Salima to say final words before concluding the session.
Thank you, Kauthar. I would like to thank all of those who attended the events, and especially thanks to UNMAS Iraq for conducting such pioneer study in the country. Thank you for all. Thank you, Kauthar.
Thanks, Ms. Salima. So I believe that's it. Thank you, and probably we'll see you next time in the upcoming NDM-UN event. Thank you, and have a great day, week, and year. Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.